Good day, everybody. My name is Carlos. Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of My Life with Our Limits podcast. Before we continue with our wonderful guests, or introduce our wonderful guest, which I will let Leah do that, I want to introduce our co-host, the brain of the podcast, the person who lights up the podcast, which is Leah Eisen. How are you doing, Leah? Today?
I'm good. I'm blushing now, I think.
You're blushing?
Yeah,
I can
but
see
thank
that.
you. I light it up.
I can see that. No, I'm very happy to see you.
Thank
As
you. You
always,
too.
very, very excited to be in another episode of My Life Without Limits. So yeah, it's great. So we have two wonderful guests from this series of Barrier-Free Alberta that you were able to connect again. And I think it's our last one. Is that correct for the series?
So. I think this will be the last one in the series, as I don't have any other bookings.
I think it's our last one.
If anybody from Barrier-Free Alberta is welcome anytime.
If there's anybody that the last minute want to jump in, feel free, and we'll definitely would love to have you. But yeah, if you don't mind introducing our two wonderful guests, and we can get started for sure.
Yeah, very happy to be joined by two new friends, Maureen and Catherine, and they're going to talk to us today about some of the barriers and challenges and stigma and all that in the autistic community. So Maureen, why don't we start with you, because you work with Autism Edmonton, telling us a little bit about yourself and about the organization.
Absolutely. My name is Maureen Rossi, and I'm the programs manager at Autism Edmonton. So I'm lucky enough to be in charge of everything that's forward-facing and member-facing, which means that I have the joy of getting to meet and know so many of our members. We have over 6,000 members in our population in Edmonton and area. So it's a big organization, and we talk about that a lot because of the isolation within the autistic community. Just letting folks know that they're not alone in our demographic, in our city. And so we do a lot of frontline supports in terms of support navigation and system navigation. We try to support individuals in a variety of levels with family supports, adult supports. We have discussion groups for women, for seniors, for LGBTQ2S+, IA groups. So we really do try to cover the full demographic. We also try to cover the full lifespan of individuals. So as we know in the disability sector and the disability community, oftentimes those supports drop off completely. And especially in our audience, because developmental disabilities are not always included within our demographic, our audience. And so we do find that they just, with that invisible disability of autism, they don't fit into the natural supports that have been created in our systems. So I also live the life. And so my oldest son was born with meningitis 17 years ago. And unfortunately, I had to live the system with that was my introduction to the disability world and lens. And so I kind of lived it firsthand, and he was with us for 10 years, fully dependent on a lot of, with a lot of needs in terms of being G-tube fed and having epilepsy and using a wheelchair, using a lot of different assistive devices. And so I've learned the barriers on that side of disability as well. And then I also have an autistic son who is 14. And so having to navigate those healthcare system, educational systems, and all of the support systems for him as a lived experience, again, is very different from the work side of my life, but it really all works together for me to understand the bigger issues that we're facing in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that what got you into this work, or were you already?
I'm an educator by training, so I like to hear my own voice, apparently. It really, it gave me, I guess, again, a different perspective on what that looks like and how the systems feel on the reverse side of being underfunded and undersupported and not having enough EAs and not having enough strategies in place that we understand, and education and professional development. So all of my areas of life have fed into a deeper understanding of the disability sector and my special interest of autistics and neurodivergence.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's great work that you guys are doing. That's a lot of clients, to be, supporting. So good for you.
6,000 clients is a lot.
Yeah,
So
it's a lot of clients just in the Edmonton area. Yeah.
And actually, we just so you know, we call them members because it is
Members, yes.
We listen to them. They are our guiding direction for our organization as a society.
Yeah, we go through that here too at CP Alberta. We've gone through the whole members, clients, and, kind of differentiate, because members, they pay their, membership, but then there's clients. And I know it's always tough. You never know, but thank you for letting us know. Yeah, that's good. And Catherine, hello, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, my name is Catherine, and I am a practicum student and self-advocate at Autism Edmonton. I went through CMHA's School of Peer Support last year, and I'm doing my practicum with Autism Edmonton, planning a autistic women's retreat in October. I'm very excited about it. And one of the reasons I started planning it and decided to do this as my practicum was because I'm a late diagnosed autistic person and ADHDer. And I think I believed that once I got that piece of paper that some doors would open magically, and I would have all this support that I've longed for my whole life, that I didn't know what I was missing. And I really want to create a space where I can help facilitate positive social connections between autistic women. I know there's like an acute sense of like loneliness and isolation in many people in the autistic community. And I know it's something I've dealt with throughout my life. And I've been lucky enough to create some really beautiful friendships and have really robust social connections, especially since getting my diagnosis. And I want that for everyone. And I started with women, but I'm thinking maybe perhaps one day I need to expand it, but that's kind of my safe place, I think, because I began my peer support journey by facilitating the women's discussion group at Autism Edmonton after I began attending 2 years ago. My first meeting, I cried the whole time because, and I don't even think I talked because I was just so overcome with emotion by hearing other women speak what felt like my story. It felt like they were talking right to me, even though they'd never met me. And there was something really powerful in that. And there's something really powerful when you feel seen. And I think a lot of autistic people feel seen for the wrong reasons. And I want to create spaces where we're seen for all of the wonderful things that we have to offer and we have to bring to the world, and not from a place of deficit and barriers and isolation. Because some of the most wonderful and magical people I've met are autistic, and they are some of my closest friends, and I'm so grateful for them.
Oh, that's beautiful. Very well said.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very well. I do have a couple
absolutely.
of questions for Catherine actually, but yeah, if you want to just
No,
spread
you
it
go
out.
ahead.
Oh,
You
well,
go
the
ahead.
two questions I have, you mentioned uh one that you were late diagnosed, and I was
Yeah.
curious to know how old were you when you were late diagnosed with autism?
Yeah, so I'm 40 now, so I was diagnosed at 38, in it coming up in October. It'll be 2 years. And during my autism diagnosis, I was recommended to get diagnosed for ADHD. So
Yeah.
that I got that diagnosis in the winter, the following winter.
Yeah.
And um so the reason that the ADHD diagnosis jumped out at my assessment professional was because I said I thrive on routine, but I struggle
Mhm.
to implement it for myself.
Yeah.
And that was a little flag that helped to kind of notify the
Yeah.
professional that I might have ADHD, which I do. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And the other question I have, thank you for answering that one because that's really, I didn't realize that you can be diagnosed late in regards to, well, I was diagnosed since I was a kid with my disability, so I kind
Yeah.
of thought all people with autism get diagnosed earlier, but now that you have your case, it's very interesting because it sure enough can see that you were diagnosed just recently, 2 years ago almost, as you mentioned. The other question is you mentioned that people with autism sometimes they feel unseen, they feel that they're not being, I don't know if that's the correct word that you were using, but or maybe I didn't hear it correctly and I'm wrong. I'm sorry about that, but if what are some of the things that you saw in particular, or you seen in particular with your group about not being seen, that you're like, okay, I want to make sure to be seen a little more?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think one of the things that, and it was seen, that is what the word, that was the correct word.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think I think um so from my understanding, it is more common for women to be late diagnosed. Um, and I think there are also many gender identities that are also experiencing more late diagnoses as well because of masking and also the advance in knowledge of what autism is and more autistic professionals becoming trained and being able to identify their peers and support the community. But as far as being seen, there's this really beautiful quote, and I'm not sure I'm going to do it justice, but it's by Brene Brown, and I believe it's from her book Daring Greatly, and it's the opposite, or fitting in is the opposite of belonging. And when you are a high masking autistic person who is undiagnosed and you don't know you're autistic and you don't know why you have all these struggles and you don't know why life is so hard
Mm-hmm.
for you compared to other people, um, you try so hard to fit in. You
Mm-hmm.
change everything about yourself to fit in. You try to take this magical human
Mm-hmm.
that is full of like life and love and wonder, and you just kind of stuff it into this tiny little shell.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I lost myself and I felt like I was trying so hard to be invisible. I was trying not to be seen because when I was seen, I was met with, bullying or, various ways of being treated that just weren't kind. I wasn't met with
Mm-hmm.
a lot of kindness. And yet once I started figuring out who I was under that mask, and once I started untangling what it really meant to belong, and that's that belonging. That's like finding who you are. That's the being seen, you know, allowing yourself to be seen fully by the world for and not for everything that you have been told is quote unquote wrong with you.
Yeah.
For everything, for all the beautiful parts of yourself, for all everything. We all have beauty in some form. And I just think in the last few years, I've really found that sense of belonging. And I feel connected to my community and connected to the world in a way that I never thought was possible before. And that's what I want to help facilitate in our community. I want more autistic people to feel that sense of belonging and feel that sense of community, and to know that it's okay and it's safe to be seen.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Wow.
that is so beautiful. And
It is.
honestly, autism, ADHD in women is one of my most favorite topics
Yep.
because I'm fascinated by it, and I've heard so many stories about the late diagnosis, and I know a lot of women find this out when they become a parent because they see it in their children, and that's what happened with me, is seeing things in my daughter, and I was like, oh my God, she's exactly like me. And then talking to experts and talking and realizing, yeah, we have ADHD, you know, and then especially I'm seeing so many women coming out saying that they're ADHD. And I don't know how you guys feel about that term, but
Yeah,
I
I
just
like that
find them
term.
to be the most fascinating people and their stories. And I just, oh, I love. So do you consider that for yourself too, that term ADHD, or do you?
No, I love that term.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of it. Yeah, I think it's a good way to encompass the the particular struggles that come with combating
Yeah.
diagnoses or
Yeah.
diagnoses. Yeah, they kind
Yeah.
of tend to. Yeah, I feel like it's a battle. They battle each other
They battle
often.
each other. So they might as
Yeah,
well be in the name together. And
yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
My
Oh,
special
yeah,
interest as well, Leah. And so it's one of those things, our women's group is fascinating for me for that, because just such unique humans that come to the table, most
yeah,
of them late diagnosed, most of them coming from either being told by friends or being family
yeah,
connected. And
Yeah.
understanding the history of autism and ADHD is really crucial in that, because
yeah,
we just started diagnosing in the 70s period, and the tools were created around male presentation, so they were
yes,
not equipped to diagnose women. So we see diagnosis of one female to every 4 males, but that's not necessarily the realistic
exactly.
societal example of it. And so yeah, it's been a growth. Our community and the neuro affirming movement has been really just getting its legs underneath it in the last decade, I would say.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up too, because I also find one thing that just irks me a lot when we talk about it is that people, when they say things like, well, everybody has a little, they're all a little, you know, and why is everybody being diagnosed nowadays? And it's like, well, because we're just learning, like we're
Yeah.
just learning about
Yeah.
this. That's why it seems like everybody's being diagnosed. And, you know, trying to explain to people that there's a huge difference between maybe being a little unfocused now and then to the point where it literally impacts your life. And like, you know, seeing my daughter come home from school or something sometime going, why am I always the one that isn't the best? Like, why am I always
Yeah.
the one that screws up? Why am I always the one? And I'm like, it's not you. It's your brain. Like, unfortunately, it's just the way your brain works.
Yeah.
So, like, do you find that that's one of the stigmas is a lot of people when they say, well, everybody's a little ADHD, and it's like,
I actually use it as a teaching point, Because I
Mhm.
think the beauty of some of the characteristics of autism and ADHD is that we can all empathize a little, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sensory sensitivities, we can empathize with the idea that, yes, I also hate loud noises. Yes,
right.
but when you hate that loud noise, does it end your day?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Some
yeah,
Exactly.
individuals, that's the end of the day now because
yes,
Yeah.
being startled by that noise. No, it doesn't. But it impacted you enough to know that it is something very bothering, right? And so you can empathize with an autistic, but you're never going to be able to actually feel what they feel in those moments, right? And so
right.
I do always use those as teaching points because I'm like, yes, so if you get that, you can understand that at an extreme, it's a day ender. I have
Yeah,
a very cute meme about a little guy that has a scratchy tag and he's laying on the ground saying, I'm dying.
yeah,
Because that's how bad it is when you
yeah,
do a sensory sensitivity or any kind of direct impact that way. And so we are always having to combat the fallacies around and the misconceptions around
yes,
diagnosis. But like you said, we're learning as we go. And I do think that's the brilliance of it is that neurotypical minds can entertain what it might be like. And so we
yeah,
can adjust as a society, we can adjust to seeing somebody stim in public. That's okay. Is it affecting me? No, I see it.
exactly.
It's visually
Yeah.
interesting, but now that I know what it is, they need to stim. They're getting off some energy. They need to burn that. Awesome. They have a strategy
Yeah,
that's working. Moving
that's
on.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think also that this phrase like everyone's a little autistic or everyone's a little ADHD, this is I try to I try to look at I don't appreciate the phrase or the
Oh,
yeah,
comment,
absolutely
but
not. Yeah.
also I try to approach it with a bit of compassion because I understand where it's coming from a lot of the time. And I
yeah,
think a lot of the time it's coming from a place where people are trying to say, I see you.
Mm.
Like,
right.
look,
Yeah,
yeah, and maybe it's not the most, I don't know, I've lost the word, but like most appropriate
right.
way to convey that.
Mm.
And but I also think that most people who do say like something of that, like,
Mhm.
you know, are trying to connect
Yeah.
with
Okay,
us as an
yes, I love that.
autistic community, and they're trying to say, you know, like a me too kind of feeling. Like
Yeah.
when
Yeah,
someone says me too, it's very validating. I think that's what they're trying to give us.
Yeah.
It's just they're going about it the wrong
yeah,
way. But I do
yeah.
try and meet that phrase with a bit of compassion, knowing that.
Mhm.
As for like more people getting diagnosed now, there was this really amazing chart I saw. It was two graphs side by side, and it was um, left-handedness and the graph, like when they started allowing people to write with their right hand or left
Right.
hand, like choose, and a graph of like um, diagnoses for autism and that, and they were
Yeah.
very similar in
Oh,
that like now we're actually like seeing the whole picture. Well, maybe not even. Maybe in a few years we'll have an even
yeah,
more vast
Yeah.
picture of what autism is. But before we were just seeing a tiny, tiny bit. It's like forcing people to write with their left hand,
yeah,
or write with their right hand when they're
yeah.
Yeah.
left-handed.
When they left.
It's the same. Like for much of my life, I was forced to write with my right hand when I was left-handed.
Mhm.
Not in that actual sense, like metaphorically, but like I was masking. I was masking who I was. I was trying to be less autistic
Yeah,
because like people didn't know, you know, what was kind of happening with me. We didn't have the language. We didn't have the information to give me that diagnosis at that time.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I struggled and I suffered quite greatly.
Sure.
But now we have so much more knowledge and we have such a more vast and detailed picture of what autism is. So we're able to give supports and we're able to allow these younger people, especially women, young girls, to be diagnosed earlier. And so they're not having to have, well, I'm certain they still struggle. Everyone struggles, but maybe they're able to get the support they need sooner.
Yes,
So their
right?
struggles don't have to be quite so severe, in hopes that their struggles don't have to be quite so severe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
I feel like I see that too in our youth, right? I'm lucky enough
Yeah.
to be along the journey with my 14-year-old.
yeah.
I see youth that are totally aware and get it. And I think it's a lot of those intersectionalities too, with the diversity of sexuality and gender.
Yep.
But just that they get that people are all sorts of different, and that's wonderful. And like my son is often very vocal. Like when he was young, he would say, "I'm autistic. Are you?" And like
That's awesome.
a deficit or he's learning now because of his own stims, different ways that he has barriers. But I just saw it so beautifully that, and then other kids would be like, no, or yes, well, I have ADHD, or I have like, it wasn't an insult. It wasn't a hushed conversation. They openly talk about these things, as well as their pronouns, as well as,
Yes.
they're happy to have those conversations. And I really have hope in the youth right now.
No, I totally, I see my nieces and my daughter and I'm just like, oh, they get it, talking about women's issues and things going on in the world. And I just see them taking these girlhood classes and I'm just like,
Maureen and Catherine, Maureen, and on that topic of kind of being, from what I notice, is your son is open to embracing that he is autistic, right? So for those people who, yourself, I don't know if you know, but I was born in Mexico, and I've seen a lot of cases before I came of people with autism down there who are living with autism, and I actually have somebody really close to me who has someone with autism, but when you talk to, or when we talk to them, they don't embrace it. They don't really want their particular person, whether it's a daughter or a son, to know the rest of the people that are around them that he or she has autism. What are some of the my question for you would be, what are some of the advice that you can give to people who might want to hide their children, or want to pretend that their children to be, I'm not saying that people with autism are not normal. They are totally more normal than everyone I know, right? But some of those particular people that I know, they don't feel like they're normal, so they want to hide it because they want to pretend that, oh, my son doesn't have autism, or my daughter doesn't have autism. What are some of the examples that you can give, or an advice that you can give of opening up and embracing that your son or daughter have autism?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a really good question. And from a parent perspective, it is difficult, and I don't want to simplify it too much, because I know that a lot of families have very layered situations for themselves that they have to adapt to. Again, I was lucky enough, from my perspective, I had a child on palliative care. So for me, the comparison was a no-brainer. Like, I had a healthy, happy, very outgoing, very creative, wonderful son who is capable of anything, right? And so for me, the deficits were almost minimal in my mind. He was happy. He was playing. Sure, he was verbally delayed at certain things. He was slow to potty train. Those pieces you adapt to. But I was also changing my 9-year-old at the same time in his wheelchair and having to deal with real significant physical disabilities that that impact your everyday movement. And so I guess that's, from my lens, it was understanding that the difficulties that Max is going to have to encounter, my son is going to have to encounter that is autistic, is so much easier than some of the difficulties my oldest son had to face.
Right.
And going out in community and understanding and having people understand him. I had to be the voice for my son who was in a wheelchair and verbal and all of the other pieces. But just to give him that voice for himself, to say, hey, this is who I am, and I'm proud of who I am. And I guess we always, we focused on the positives, right? We focused on all of his gifts and assets, and showed those to the world. And I guess just like any other parent, if my kid was a basketballer and getting all the shots, I would be bragging about that. My son is a coder and can put a video game together in 3 minutes, and I talk about that all the time. Right? So he has his gifts and skill sets and things that he can offer the world that are so valuable. And I think that's really just the shift that we have to make. I do think that the barriers were a little bit easier for families and individuals. It would certainly make that a lot less, that stigma a lot less, for families to feel like they have to hide away. The other issue with autistic individuals sometimes is that they don't want to be around people sometimes.
I don't blame them.
Families are trying to protect their child a lot of the time. I do see of like, no, you're not going to have to deal with that, because I know you don't like that, and that's the trigger for you. So again, I wish it was a simple answer, but unfortunately,
no, you're right. It's not, and sorry for a hard question, but it's an interesting question, you know, like that people face in the autistic community.
I have something I think I could add to this. I'm not a parent myself, but I think there's a big factor that shame can play in the decisions people, parents and also autistic individuals, in the decisions that they make about how they show up in the world. And I think for me, it was really hard for me. It's only been recently that I've been out about my autism, because I had a lot of shame to unpick and untangle about who I was and what autism meant to me. For much of my childhood, I was bullied quite extremely, and I was called the R word a lot, and that was devastating to me. And I think I was so scared to tell the world I was autistic, because I was so scared that would mean that those children who called me the R word were right. That was my fear. That was my biggest fear about sharing that with the world. And I know now in my heart that that's not what autism is, and that word is cruel, and it's unkind, and it's made to other. And I am so grateful for my autism diagnosis. I'm so grateful for everything it's given me, because it's given me a way to see myself in a new light. It's given me access to a community of people that have lifted me up and supported me in a way that I've always longed for. Working at Autism Edmonton right now has been a dream. I can't tell you how lovely it is, and to be supported and to be encouraged every day. I've not had jobs like that in the past, where you just feel like you matter, and like what you say matters, and that you're not, I think I just had a lot of really terrible jobs, but I feel really appreciated for, and I think
you feel like you belong. I wanted to use
I
that
feel
word. You
like
feel like
I
you belong.
belong.
You
Yeah.
belong. Yeah.
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 And I think that it's really hard when autism gets stuck together with shame. And I think that happens a lot. And I think it happens for a lot of late diagnosed individuals, especially because we're treated so poorly for all of the things that make us autistic. So when you can untangle that, when you can see the beauty in it, and you can see, you know, the sense of belonging and how much that has given me in my identity and knowing myself and being able to show up in the world in the way that I've always longed to, well, there's no space for shame anymore.
Yeah.
So I really think that my advice to any parent or autistic person that is feeling like they need to hide is to really look at that shame piece of it, and just connect with autistic individuals. Listen to podcasts where people are authentically autistic, read books about people who are living their lives in a wonderfully autistic way, and just really open yourself up to, you know, autism as not being a deficit, just a different way of being in the world.
Yes.
I exist in a different way. Yeah.
I know. I'm just
Absolutely.
stand up
That's
and
great.
clap. Yes.
I don't think it's appropriate to clap in the podcast, but
Probably not, but you know what? Do it anyway. No, that's just so beautiful. No, you should have your own podcast, Catherine. I could listen to you speak about it. Like, honestly, it's, you
That
just
means a lot
explain
to
it and
hear.
it makes so much sense. Yeah.
Way a lot of
Thank you.
sense for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
I
you.
feel emotional now.
Oh, no.
Thank you.
We'll change the subject now.
Just
But
one
we
last
should
add to
Oh,
that.
sorry.
I think
Yes.
community is so important. So not feeling isolated, not feeling alone, hearing those other voices of other autistics saying, this is my lived experience too. And being able to share those barriers as well, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this
Yeah.
is a crappy part about being autistic.
Yes.
Because there's lots of things. I mean, I get it. Like
Yeah.
my poor son has to struggle with that all the time. He talks
Yeah.
about his ADHD, where he's like, my brain is battling itself. And because
Yeah, I'm familiar with that feeling.
I bet. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So speaking on those barriers, because we do have a rally coming up that Barrier Free Alberta is hosting in Calgary and Edmonton on September 28th at 1:30 in Calgary at the McDougall Center, East Lawn, and then in Edmonton at the Legislature Building on the front steps. So since we're going to be doing that, let's talk just a little bit about the barriers faced by the autistic community and how you feel that Alberta coming to its senses and creating accessibility legislation, like what would you like to see be part of that when it comes to the autistic community?
I'll start with just a quick survey that we actually did a couple of
Sure.
on barriers for autistic individuals. And
Great. Yes.
the results that we received was the top 3 areas that are most difficult for autistic individuals are access to housing, employment, and community connection.
Yes.
So that's what we hear from our members. But I directly from Catherine would be great too.
Sure.
I think all of those, but I would also like to see more mental health supports, as well as, like, I was trying to add up what my care costs as an autistic person financially. So I'm looking into getting support from an occupational therapist, and I'm grateful because my spouse is has, you know, good benefits from his work, and he supported me from a financial standpoint for many years. But there are many people in the autistic community that don't have partners or spouses that are able to do that for them, and they have to do it themselves. And so when I started adding up how much it costs to be me, I was really shocked, and I was really upset that in order for me to be well and live my life as I do now, the financial burden it's quite a lot. And I would like to see the Alberta government, yes, there's the disability tax credit, and yes, some autistic people have access to AISH, but I would love to see more services covered by Alberta Health. Like I want to see occupational therapy for adults. Yes, they cover it for children, but as soon as you're 18, all of a sudden you have no access to these supports. It's gone. And autistic children grow, if they're lucky, into autistic adults.
That's right.
And mental health support. So much of the autistic community needs mental health support, needs people to be on their team. Especially even the autistic folks who don't really like people need people. They need someone that they can connect to. They need someone who can hear them, and they need someone who can validate their experiences.
Exactly.
Who can guide them too, because some of them might be lost, some of them might not know that they're lost, and they need to be guided a little bit, not the whole way, but a little bit, right? So then,
I think even, and just understanding that diagnosis currently is a barrier, because our wait list for even for youth is up to 18 months, but for adults is up to 5 years plus.
That's right. Even with his ADHD, right? I always like talk to the doctor. I'm like, okay, for my daughter and I, because we haven't been official, but I know. But then it's like it would cost thousands of dollars for either of us to get an official, and then, I talked to her doctor, our family doctor, and he doesn't medicate children, which I mean, I understand, but at the same time, I do have letters from Alberta Health Services, counselors that say, yes, this child is really, it's tough. So then, when I look at that cost, I think, I can't do, and then I don't want to deal with it at the time, and I'm like, so then we just.
That's very ADHD of you.
Oh my God, if you knew, isn't it though?
It's true. It's completely true.
It's true. And I do that with almost everything in my life these days. And then getting older, and I know menopause is showing signs, and I find it's getting worse.
It is actually more significant for neurodivergent women. So if you want to look at our different presentations, we have one on menopause in neurodivergent women, but it's so sad that it's true with the mental health services. If we were proactive, we wouldn't. But then you do end up with actual more severe cases and physical presentation of different things as well. So it's a really bad steamroll of problems that follow lack of service in areas that when we could be proactive.
That's right. Well, I'm finding I could talk about this forever. I really gravitate towards women autistic and ADHD. I do. Maybe it says a lot about me, but I really do. I might have to come to one of your.
You might have to come to one of our women's groups and see.
I might have to, and just
how well you fit in. I know that about myself. So I self-diagnosed ADHD long ago, and when I was going through my education courses, actually, and it reflected. It was so funny. Even during that time, at 20 years old, I reflected through my childhood of education. I was like, hold on. So when I was being shuffled into gifted and talented programs and out of the classroom, they were just trying to get me out of the classroom and away from the
because I know. Yeah. And I'm noticing that term too. A lot of people, like on TikTok, I watch a lot of TikTok because I do learn a lot from it and getting people's perspectives. A lot of people will start off with, I'm a self-diagnosed ADHD, and it's almost becoming like okay, like
Yeah.
to say like I have ADHD, it's only self-diagnosed, but
But it's
because
not only self-diagnosed, it's self-diagnosed. I think that's one of the big things too. Like if they gave more weight to self-diagnosis
yeah,
and doctors were able to offer services and access to these services, if you have a wait list of 5 years to receive a diagnosis, then people and just trust that people know themselves
Exactly.
and
right,
That's a good point.
trust that a doctor that sees me a few times a year does not know me
right,
better than I know me.
Exactly.
And
Especially that
so
piece
if
of
you
the
open that possibility to
yeah,
access to these services with a self-diagnosis, well, what kind of changes would that make in the world?
You
right,
will reduce the
right,
waiting list by a year
Yeah.
or less, first of all,
yeah,
okay, by
yeah,
by doing that, right?
yeah,
So
that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah,
Wow.
we actually have taken on that policy of self-diagnosis at our offices as well.
Oh, okay.
Because
Oh,
again,
awesome.
our adult population is not being served. And then to say, oh yeah, come see us after you get your diagnosis in 5 years is just completely
Right.
fair. So I've always kind of taken that perspective since I've been working here and understanding that yes, self-diagnosis is valid. There's actually studies that say that it has a good 90%, 95%
Oh,
accuracy.
I
So
love hearing that.
if you think you are, I always say again, because there's no supports for adults, then
Yeah.
put the lens on your life.
yeah,
Make
Mm,
sure that you know the strategies. What is autism or ADHD? What does it look like?
yeah,
How do you help yourself, right? Like
yeah,
should, if
yeah.
you think you're ADHD, make sure you get a reminder app on all your
Yes.
devices so that you have lists. Make sure, put those strategies in place.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to come with money or support necessarily, but you can do what you need to do in order to support yourself and self-advocate on
Yeah.
these big pieces. And I think
And
that's
come
just
to the
really important.
discussion groups.
Yeah, that's true, right? And like you said, see how you fit in or how you feel you belong. See how you relate and just opens up a whole
Yeah.
world, right? Of
yeah,
things. I did see a TikTok of a lady who talked about how she said to her husband, like, what's your scenario in your head when you're trying to sleep? And he was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, every night when I'm trying to go to bed, I imagine I'm at Adele's house and I'm going for dinner and I think of all the people that are there and the conversations we have. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I'm like, so I'm not totally out there because I do the same thing. Like it's a dissociation type thing. And I was like, it just sort of, I don't know, it just kind of makes you feel like a weight's lifted off because you feel like you're not the only one,
yeah,
like you're
I did the same
a little
thing
insane.
at the mall. We were walking down the mall and he looks at me and he said, because he realizes I'm ADHD as well. And he said to me, Mom, look around. All these people, they only have one thought. They're focused on one thing in their head. Meanwhile, we're having 16 conversations,
Yes.
showing the shiny lights, distracted by that squirrel. And like,
Yes, I couldn't imagine. And
that's
I've heard
funny.
people don't have thoughts at all, that there are people that walk
Yeah,
around with zero thoughts. And
your
I'm just like,
mind.
I
I
don't know what that would be like.
I
I
don't know
have
what that would
no
be like
idea.
either.
But then it's like,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm lucky. I do. I have lots of thoughts going through
Yeah,
my head. My
Yeah.
mind is always alive. And yeah, it just kind of when you see people talk, that's why I like TikTok so much for those things, because you see people come out when they have realizations about themselves, and then you're like, oh yeah.
I just think
Yeah.
it's wonderful that people are talking about it, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah, the
all
exactly.
of those things we would
conversations.
shut down in the
Yeah.
past. And it's like,
Yeah.
let's talk about it. Let's talk about what all
Yeah.
those thoughts that are going through your
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah. It
exactly.
used to be so important to like, even just I have family members who years ago went to a therapist, and it was a shameful family secret
Yeah,
almost,
right?
and
Yeah.
it's changed, and I think in that way, in the conversations and the openness to um mental health struggles and conversations has really changed for the better. I think too, I would like to say, the first day I took my ADHD medication for the first time as an adult, I again cried. This is
Yeah.
similar to the women's group because my head didn't get silent, but it got so much more quiet. And I was able, and it was so, I just realized, I'm like, it didn't have to be so hard. Like,
Yeah.
and then the second day, I took a stimulant medication and then slept all morning. Because
Oh.
I was like, I have always had trouble sleeping because I go to bed and my mind, I play over
Yeah.
every single situation in the day and my brain zeroes in on all the moments where I was socially awkward or cringy or
Absolutely.
whatever. And my brain is unkind to me when I'm trying to sleep. So
Yeah.
I think what happened, I suspect my brain got a bit quiet and was like, oh yes, let's sleep. Like let's
I'm
just
exhausted.
It's
Yes.
like,
I'm
it's time to
exhausted.
fall asleep, right?
Yeah. And I'm just shocked at how like I don't, it's not like I'm not saying it's a magical medication by any means or anything. It
Right.
took me some time to get it,
Yeah.
but there are ways to support ADHD, and I do think that doctors should be more open to having conversations with their parent or with with their patients about ADHD medication support, even if they don't have a diagnosis, even if they're
Right.
coming in and they're self-reporting these symptoms and they're sharing that, because I know that it can be it was life-changing for me. I know that's not the case for everyone. Everyone has their own situation,
Yeah.
but I do think that it should be more of a conversation and more doctors should be open to it.
Yeah. It's worth a shot,
Absolutely.
right? It's worth
Yeah.
a shot.
Absolutely.
Maureen and Catherine, I could go on. Like seriously, we might have to do an autistic women series or something. I don't know, but yeah, I could go on and on. But unfortunately, I don't want people to feel daunted when they find out we're doing a 3-hour episode. So I don't know if they'll listen. So we should wrap it up. But I do want to ask real quick before we do end this, Catherine, for you. What does the term life without limits mean to you? Does it spark something in you? And do you feel that you're living a life without limits?
Yeah, I think for me, a life without limits is a life where I let go of all of the beliefs and all of the shoulds that I've ever told myself of like what I can and can't do and what I'm capable of. A lot of people have tried to tell me what to do for most of my life, and direct me. And now I am directing myself and I am creating a life for myself that is far more fulfilling and nourishing and vast than I thought possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And you, Maureen, what about you? What does life without limits mean to you?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would like to say that I think it encompasses just having access and being able to dream to the fullest capability of what I see. I
Yeah.
can do what my son sees he can do. And not having, like Catherine said, other people's expectations or limitations put on another person and defining who they are. So dream big, do whatever you really believe you think you can do, and go for it without stigma, without judgment, and other people's expectations on you.
Yeah.
I really like always this answer because it's always different. And it's always something new that I learn, that we both learn about this answer or this question. It started one way and then it shifted every single time because it's just so vast and so great to hear the different responses that people give. So thank you, Corinne. Thank you, Maureen. Sorry, and thank you, Catherine, for your answers, because I mentally record them and then I'm writing them on a piece of paper. What everyone has said. So then at the end of the day, I can compare it. At the end of the year, I can compare how the answer has shifted my
Mhm.
thinking. So it's always really
Yeah.
cool. Really
Yeah,
cool.
it
Thank you
is.
for
It is.
sharing. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you for
Um,
being here. That was an awesome conversation, and
it,
I'd like to continue it down the road.
it was, and I wouldn't be surprised if Leah actually starts a women autism
Start showing
series,
up to the,
because
you know what? Yeah,
Catherine might be looking for a job after her graduation.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
I wouldn't say it's an interesting topic, and
It
it's,
is.
it's so valuable for people to listen to. I'm quite
Yeah.
certain that the people in Mexico that I know that have children and adults with autism, I'll make sure to listen to this podcast, as
Yes.
well as in Canada, who
Yeah.
who are listening to this podcast, or
Yes.
wherever they are around the world. Also, don't forget about the rally coming up September
Yeah.
28th. That is put on by Barriers Free Alberta.
Mhm.
1:30 on both cities, Edmonton and Calgary. Do
Yeah.
not fall asleep. Get out of your house.
Yeah.
Come out of your house with your family, friends. Put a little sign. Bring
Yeah.
lots of signs. Make sure you don't go too wild, but we need your
Yeah.
voices, so then we can make sure that the voices have been heard, and hopefully
Yes.
Alberta will finally listen. I hope that nobody think that I don't think they're listening, but they do need to
Well,
listen to us. You
they
know, they
do.
do need to listen, and I think this rally is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
September 28th is on a Saturday, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. At 1:30 in the afternoon on both cities. Feel free to show up. Leah will be there. I will be there. Well, I'm not sure if Leah will. Leah, would
Yeah,
you
I'll
be
be
there?
there.
Oh, okay.
Take photos.
I'm already voluntold. I'm already voluntold, Leah. No.
Yeah, no, I'll be there.
So I'll be there for sure. So make sure to be there. Make sure you bring your family and friends, because the more people it is, the better.
Yes,
The better it is.
that's right.
Thank you once again, Maureen and Catherine, for
Yes.
being a part of My Life Without Limits. Those of you guys who are listening to us, I hope you have enjoyed this episode as much as me and Leah have enjoyed. And hopefully you can continue to listen to our episodes coming up.
Yeah.
Feel free to connect with us, with myself and Leah. And remember to always live your life without limits. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.